Welcome to 2013 through 2023, an industry retrospective. I'm Dr. Chantal Tibbles, and we're here live by mindbrowse.com for this very special discussion. This event is brought to you today by Angie Roundtree, there she is over there, and shush.com, the web's premier porn site for women and couples. For those of you watching our live stream via Twitter, via Shush for Women, hello. This event is also part of shush.com's Sex Talk Tuesday programming. Let's get started. So, we've all heard the old adage, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Does that apply to our industry? I think so. Today we're going to discuss three key dynamics guiding and shaping porn as we know it: our internal industry culture, technology, and mainstream social trends. Taking a deeper look at how these areas have evolved since 2013. How much has changed in the past 10 years, how much has stayed the same, and what might any of this tell us about the future? But before we get started, let's meet our panelists. Let's start with this young gentleman here to my right. Sir, who are you and what do you do in the industry?
I have a question. Which camera is the one streaming?
Don't worry about it, just talk.
Am I supposed to be looking at it? I don't know.
Be natural.
Be natural. I was just asking Siri.
Don't play by the camera.
I was asking Siri what do I do with all the lights and stuff, so she was telling me to just ignore it. It's normal. All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Corey Silverstein. I'm with Silverstein Legal. I've been in the adult entertainment industry since it's about 2002 or 3, so a little bit before the 10 years we're going back today. MyAdultAttorney.com is the brand most you know me by. I run a website, wow, that was stupid, a law firm that caters to basically all areas of the adult entertainment industry. So pleasure to be here, absolute honor to be here with this panel, and thank you to Angie and Colin and wherever Angie went, and hello to all of the online people watching.
Thank you so much, that was very eloquent. Moving on.
Hi, I'm Siri Dahl. I'm a performer. I've been in the industry since 2012, with a break in between, in the middle there. But yeah, performer, and I guess I'm also an activist for sex workers in our industry. I'll leave it at that.
I guess.
Hi, Twitter.
And moving on.
Hi, my name is Cinnamon Love. My 2023 marks my 30th year as Cinnamon Love, actually. So I've been fucking people on film for a really long time. I took a break, but I'm still getting naked on the internet. And I run the BIPOC Collective, which is an activist space that merges the mainstream performer life with those who are working in criminalized labor, which I started in 2020. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Lotus was one of our early, and Lasha were some of our early, and Ray were some of our early adopters. And, but more than anything, it's like at the core, I'm a sex worker, longtime sex worker. I actually started doing sex work as an unhoused youth, doing street-based survival work. So I come to this space with a lot of different perspectives that I'm sure many of you will be able to appreciate.
Maybe.
So I forgot it was my turn. I got so excited and then you looked at me and I was like, oh look! Sorry. My name is Crystal Penn. I've been in the adult industry since 2008. I'm the creative and editorial director at Groovy Productions, which is one of the longest running trans production companies. I'm also the executive producer of the Trans Erotica Awards, or the T-Show, which we dub as the Oscars of trans porn. This year is going to be our 15-year anniversary, and you're all welcome to come to Hollywood.
Yay!
Thank you. I'm also a marriage and family therapist trainee, looking to train other therapists to work in our community.
Amazing. So, as you all can probably tell from this fantastic group up here, we have a lot of experience in the industry, a lot of observation, a lot of time and a lot of expertise. I'm excited to hear what they have to say. So let's think about our first sort of area of interaction, which is the mainstream world and how it interacts with our community and intersects. So thinking about how consumers in the public interact with adult content, as well as how consumers in the public interact with themselves about porn, because that's a whole interesting issue there. How we as a community present our labor and our culture, and also how we react to and respond to the mainstream world. A lot of things. Siri, you activist, you think, in the past 10 years, how have you seen our community interacting with the vanilla world and the vanilla world interacting with us? What have you observed? Huge question.
Yeah, it's changed. I think it's in some ways significantly, in others smaller changes. But from my perspective is, I started out as a performer in 2012, and as we all know, especially if you're a performer, things were real different then. I mean, yeah, it was still internet-based primarily, but we didn't have a way to monetize our own content direct to fans in the way that we have tons of ways to do that now. So I started out before that was, before OnlyFans had come along even, or was big, I guess. But I retired in 2015 and then came out of retirement in 2020. So while I've been in the industry technically for 10 years, it's like I had this gap where I left before OnlyFans came in, and I was living I like to call my boring civilian life for 5 years, and then I decided to come back to adult. And the shock that I experienced coming out of retirement and seeing how different things were. Like structurally in the industry, a lot of things had, to me, having left in like the end of 2014 and coming back, I was like, whoa, like it feels like some things are flipped on their head. In some good ways and some bad. Like, I first noticed how much worse the censorship was on social media, which I was aware of because I wasn't like living under a rock. I just wasn't actively doing any kind of sex work for that 5-year period. So I didn't notice how bad the Instagram censorship had gotten, for example. And that was the first thing that I was like, oh shit. I will say that like as a performer, I think things generally have improved very much within the business. And I also do think that on a larger scale, there is more acceptance or like less stigma. I will say, like at least it might be a generational thing, but I'm a millennial and I definitely feel that there is so much less stigma around what I do for a living now.
In the general public.
In the general public, yes. And also that even just like the like Overton window of people's opinions of sex work has shifted just in the last decade for, like I used to be terrified to actually tell people what I did for a living, and now I'm not, I don't care. Maybe part of it is just me being more comfortable with it, but I live in Kentucky. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, which is a very conservative state, and the city I'm in it's not super conservative, but it is still like, it's got those influences. And I have honestly like yet to meet someone who's like, if they know me, if they even talk to me for 5 minutes, who I can't get on board with like being in favor of sex workers' rights. So I have these conversations all the time with people who don't know anything about our industry, and the framing matters. So
Certainly.
yes, that's, and I kind of got too into the weeds there. I know it's supposed to be the more big picture answer, but I've noticed a generally positive trend in the way our industry is covered in mass media. It's not always positive, but we have more examples of positive or at least honest coverage than there were 10 years ago. So that is a plus on our side. And yeah, I think
There's 2 encouraging dimensions in the weeds.
Yeah.
She starts out with like the first talking person. It's okay. Crystal, what do you see?
I was gonna say, as a fellow millennial, I think I've seen the same thing, how things have shifted, and I think, interesting enough, I think like we're in between 2 different generations. So there's what is a Generation X, who like lots of shame, right? And then we have Generation Z, which is like, yay! And so I think being sandwiched right in the middle has been interesting to see the difference. And I think what I've learned, because I've been doing educational workshops for therapists to help destigmatize porn and its consumption for the last 8 years, is that like, porn doesn't exist in a vacuum, and so the trends that we see socially and mainstream, they parallel, although really fucking slow. I can swear, right? That was okay. You can do whatever the fuck you want. I don't know, yeah. Anyway, but it parallels, you know. And so, as an example, I work in the trans part of the industry, which is a really small subsection of our industry, but we see more trans acceptance now, and that parallels the dialogues that we're having about trans visibility, trans acceptance in larger society. And so, like, I think it's been interesting to see that parallel, and also how I think in many ways sex workers still have to deal with the stigma of that, even though there are places where I see progress. It's still too fucking slow, in my opinion.
Great. Cinnamon?
I'm in love with this question because, and I thank you for both your answers. You know, it's funny when you mentioned, like, you know, Gen X having a lot of shame and stigma, and it's like, you know, my initial knee-jerk reaction as a Gen Xer is to be like, no, there wasn't, but actually there was. But part of that is because, like, I mean, I came into the industry when porn had only been legal for 5 years, you know, in '88, the Freeman versus, US versus Freeman case. And so, yeah, there was a lot of stigma in our generation around doing sex work because of the fact that people were still thinking of it as, you know, something that was seedy and underground and all of these things. Prior to 10 years ago, we would see porn or sex work in the media cycle once per, you know, as Sweeps Weeks was coming up, that's when you would get the influx of calls from television and, you know, news, you know, whatever. And now I feel like there are, you know, journalists at some of these large publications, whether it's the Washington Post or, you know, whatever, whoever, GQ, like they're more regularly covering our industry and actually listening to sex workers talk about our work and our lives. They often get it wrong still. Like, you know, I turned down an interview recently because someone from the Daily Dot wanted to know if I knew any like, you know, cis women performers who stopped working with men because of Roe v. Wade, and I was like, I'm not doing this interview. Like, this is fucking bullshit. Like, I'm not even gonna waste my energy trying to think of some answers, and I'm not introducing you to nobody either. But they are more regularly covering us, and they're covering us in really big ways. Like, to think about the fact that, I mean, even just since I started, you know, working with other sex workers at BIPOC Collective, I mean, my own personal career took a totally different trajectory in terms of media coverage because 10 years ago, I would have never gotten a call from GQ to talk about, you know, OnlyFans or to talk to, you know, Cosmo or to be in the Washington Post. Like, those conversations would have never happened because they were only interested in a very small microcosm of our industry. You know, usually the top 1% of performers who they feel like they could get something out of having a conversation with them. They could get all the clicks or whatever. So that's one thing that I feel like is really interesting, like the fact that we are getting much more mainstream coverage. They are, you know, humanizing us in a way that allows people to start to shift their view of the work and in a very real way. And then the other thing, like you had asked something, Chantal, about how we interact with mainstream, and Siri, you kind of touched on this with internet censorship. I am such a fan of the way that millennial and Gen Z creators are circumventing the algorithms. Like, you know, the fact that people are on TikTok and they are doing, you know, using trending audio in a way that pertains to the work and you know, in order to come from out and underneath the shadow band, like, that is fucking brilliant. Like, I had to jump on the train because I'm like, it's like we have always had to adapt and, to, you know, censorship, but this new crop of of creators and performers are really doing this in such a powerful way. Like even just Twitter Spaces, like for those of you during the recent production hold, performers are on Twitter Spaces offering workshops, like 12-hour workshops, like just free to just pass on information to other creators on how to make more money. And, it's like to be able to access that kind of wide net of people and pass on the information that helps people to make money it's just, I'm a fan.
Amazing. 3 very positive, happy perspectives, I would say. Corey? Doom us with law that comes from the wider world.
Well,
Sorry. Not really.
well, let me make 2 things clear. One thing, series steel-toe boots there are scaring the shit out of me. But number 2, trying to follow up after what these 3 amazing individuals just said is, frankly, it's impossible. I'm honored to be up here with them. I happen to know them quite well and consider them both clients, friends, and so like I said, I don't know how to follow that up. All I can tell you is this: I've spent my career, dedicating my career to free speech, to the First Amendment, and to fighting for and advocating for sex workers' rights. For what I believe to be all of you, everybody up here, everyone in the audience, for all of you watching at home too. I believe that in many ways, Chantel, to answer your question, we have come a long way these we're talking about 10 years, right? Okay, well, we're talking about Colin, maybe 70 years we're talking about, but since we're only going 10, the fact is that we've come a long way. The law has certainly caught up in certain areas, but since you asked for doom and gloom, I'm going to put it out there. Unfortunately, we're going to talk a little bit of the U.S. government here. We're not going to just focus on the world. Unfortunately, the United States government has not caught up as far as they should. We have some horrible laws on the books right now. I see she's all proud of doom and gloom.
No, I'm not. Reality is important, though.
FOSTA and SESTA is one of the most restrictive pieces of garbage legislation I've ever seen. I find it repulsive. I find the very fact that the U.S. government could even conceive of such a thing as absurd and ridiculous. Right now, everyone in this room is, I'm running around the show dealing and meeting with people who are all focused on what's going on in Louisiana. Because somehow Louisiana managed to once again decide that they were going to come back with another law that I believe violates the Constitution.
Tell us what it is.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Louisiana, on January 1, a new law became effective that requires anyone who's publishing content to people in the state of Louisiana to do age verification. I would note that this law is civil in nature, and Louisiana previously had a criminal version of this statute, and it was, guess what, deemed unconstitutional. But this time, the great state of Louisiana decided that they were going to try to get a little slick on us by having it a civil remedy. And by doing so, we can't, or I can't right now, because I would like to challenge it right now. I would like to file a lawsuit on behalf of numerous of my clients to say that this law is unconstitutional and an injunction should be issued immediately. The problem is though, since they were slick enough this time to make it a civil statute versus a criminal statute, my hands are tied. And the only way I'm going to be able to fight this thing is, unfortunately, someone's going to have to get nailed. And that's wrong, and that's disgusting. And that's one of the things where I believe we've made progress, but we've also moved back in the law in quite many ways. This form of forceful speech suppression through age verification, they want to name it and claim that it's all about protecting children. That's what, they label it as, it's all about that. But when you get into it and they start defining sexual acts, and you get into it and they start defining what's acceptable content, what's not, whether one provision that keeps coming to my mind is, what physical aspect of the human body is being shown versus what if someone's touching their body, and what is masturbation versus not masturbation. And it's just, it's very intriguing because I would be thrilled to have a conversation with these brilliant legislators and these guys that wrote it and ask them what the, say, hey, when you masturbate, do you touch yourself? But that's kind of an interesting.
It depends on the sex.
They might not, that's probably part of the problem.
Well, listen, in my experience, I think those guys are some of the most sexual repentant freaks there are, but that's besides the point. But the fact is that like everyone said up here, we've come a long way, Chantal. We have. Mainstream media is doing much better in terms of talking about us, interviewing us, not portraying the adult. Look, the mainstream media has always wanted to portray the adult entertainment industry as a bunch of dirty mattresses in the middle of a room with heroin needles all around it. And obviously, for those of you that are here right now, they know that's not the reality. Frankly, I think some of you are the most amazing people in the world. They don't understand that. They don't see it, but I do. But the fact is, Chantal, is that the fact that we're still getting, these ridiculous things like FOSTA, what Louisiana's doing. We have a senator in Utah that has decided on his own that he's now going to try to create a statutory definition of obscenity. This is the newest thing coming out. This guy's been a problem before. This particular ideology is so dangerous for this industry because you basically have one guy now telling us all what's going to be, considered obscene, and he's trying to overrule the Miller test that came out of the United States Supreme Court, which he can't do. And he's single-handedly trying to change the world again. So yes, definitely some progress, but at the same time, a lot of resistance and a lot of anti-free speech and anti-sex worker government activity, which is just not acceptable.
So what's important to note out of this is that we're seeing social and cultural shifts to the positive, but we're seeing structural similarities. So what Corey's talking about here is a lot of the bedrock of our society, law, that doesn't seem to be as with it, if you will, as the just average person in the gym. And that is something that we have to remember. We often forget just because somebody from Rolling Stone is trying to speak positively or just simply speak to somebody who works in the industry, that doesn't mean that that judge in Utah is not also out there. That judge and senator, whomever, the person in Utah actually has a little bit more impact on our world than that Rolling Stone reporter does, which is something that's reality. Let's move to technology now, and let's just go back to you, Siri. The industry is not the same industry as it was pre-pandemic, and the shifts were happening before, but a lot of this has to do with technology in terms of how content is produced and disseminated. So what kind of shifts have you seen in just technology and how that has impacted the experience within the adult industry?
This is probably always going to be the case when I'm talking in the present tense, but shooting content, producing your own content, and distributing it, selling it to fans is more accessible now than it ever has been. I assume that will continue to be the case because technology generally does that. But the difference in me producing my content now versus how I had to go about doing that in 2012 is pretty wild. iPhones existed in 2012, but they weren't shooting in 4K, So in terms of physically the equipment that we use, that's as a performer, someone who's not hiring a whole production team and, running multiple cameras. I do run multiple cameras, but not not big old 8K Red cameras or anything like that. It's just more accessible now than it's ever been, which is great. The timing of that works out fantastic because the other half of the technology advancements, from my perspective, is the multitude of platforms that are available for creators now. Literally, when I started out in the industry, it was clips for sale. And then a couple years into my career, it was ManyVids and clips for sale. But that was still just about it.
Two
that
websites.
And the most money you'd make is maybe a couple $1,000s if you're a really big name on those sites. Pornhub didn't have any way for creators to monetize. I was vocally like anti-Pornhub early on in my career, and I got so much shit for it. And I understood why, but I was still like, well, I'm gonna shut up about this. Like, I'm tired of having to like send takedowns. They're a part of our industry, like, you know. And that's changed. Like, that's been a massive change. And I know things aren't great with Pornhub right now because of payment processors censoring them, but, I shouldn't say payment processors, but Visa and MasterCard. But like, even that changed wildly. When I came out of, my 5-year break, and I was like, holy shit, I made like a bunch of money on Pornhub, like, as a performer, that's great. So, I mean, the technology has been huge. I think a lot of what we're seeing with like, the best parts of what's happening in our industry right now are because of both the cultural shift toward a more positive opinion and more openness to adult content, and the technology developing alongside that that's giving us, content creators the ability to actually do whatever we want and sell it directly to fans in a very, honestly, pretty easy way.
Amazing.
And yeah, I will tag on to that in terms of technology, again, going back to social media, one downside that is kind of playing into all that is, it's like, yeah, if you work for a lot of studios and you have a big name in the industry, you're probably gonna get a lot of people buying your content on ManyVids, OnlyFans, like all the subscription sites, etc. Because fans know your name. Now, if you're not a big name and you don't shoot for studios, it is very hard. Like, there's a real like gap there, because if you haven't been doing a bunch of studio work and you're not like in, features and things like that, then fans are only going to really find you online. They're going to have to find you on Instagram and on Twitter and TikTok, and it is increasingly hard to be findable on any of those public social media platforms. If there are performers in the audience, I highly recommend, this is something that I did a year ago that's been a great tool, is creating a Discord server that you can invite your own fans to. And that has been fantastic. When I lost my like big Instagram account that I had, but I hadn't had my Discord set up. And I mean, it's not nearly as many as I have followers generally, but any way that you can retain a line of access to your fans when you have a social media account deleted is a huge thing. Like backup accounts, I'm sure we all do that. But the Discord for me has been great. And it's also really just a really great like direct communication that I can offer them for free,
Pro
So
tip,
a lot of
everybody.
people sign up for that.
Pro tip, Discord. Cinnamon, what do you think? What's the impact been?
Well, first of all, Siri, you took some of my talking points. But actually, it's the one thing that I find really exciting about the way technology has shifted is that people actually don't need to do studio work the way that they used to. And, it's like, back in the day, prior to 10 years ago, it's like the dancers would then do films to get the box cover so they could come back to the clubs and feature. You don't need to do studio work anymore because Instagram is your box cover, right? And so if you are savvy and you do have the ability to create a social media following, you can make money on Instagram. On like OnlyFans and all these platforms. Not that it's easy, it's not, but some of the early adopters of OnlyFans were Instagram models who had never even done regular mainstream porn. They were really just doing nudes. Like if a nip slip might have gotten you shadow banned or gotten your post taken down or your account taken down, you could do that and monetize your platform. And so I think that we're starting to see this, the rise of the independent creator has happened because there are really savvy sex workers and content creators who have never shot mainstream porn. And frankly, the studios wouldn't have shot them anyway because they don't fit a Eurocentric standard of beauty. They don't have the, smaller features. They may be queer, they may be trans, they may have, it's like, I remember when tattoos were not a thing in porn. And it's like, there are certain types of performers who the studios are not interested in shooting anyway. So the fact that there are people who live and exist outside of the mainstream porn industry who have the ability to create a fan base, to go on Twitter, to make, and to drive traffic to these platforms is a huge, huge thing, right? We are starting to see where, the industry is so decentralized now that, the mainstream industry is no longer the center of the porn universe, right? And this is, I know we'll talk about this a little later, but just so I don't forget, it's like we have to stop making decisions, and we as a mainstream industry have to stop making decisions based on the 1% or 5% of the people in the business. Because the majority of the industry has never stepped foot on a mainstream stage. They've never stepped foot. So we have, if we, in social justice circles, we say, if you take care of the most marginalized person in the room, meaning if Black trans women are provided for and protected and their rights are taken care of, then everybody else is going to be provided for as well. And often what happens is when the anti-porn lobbyists and anti-sex work lobbyists are coming after our industry and talking about exploitation, what they're really talking about are the holes in the work that we're doing to protect the most marginalized people in the room. And so therefore, we have to start thinking about who are the people on these platforms who are not making money. It's like if we do have, and the statistics are easy to find. Anti-porn lobbyists sent out the spiders, and they're the ones who figured out that only 5% of the people on OnlyFans were making 90% of the income, and the average person on OnlyFans is making $125 an hour. $125 a month. And then what happens? You have the anti-porn folks who come in and say OnlyFans is exploitation because people are on these platforms and they're putting their bodies out there and they're only making $125 a month. So what do we have to do as an industry? We have to resolve these issues, right? If we resolve it internally, then there's nothing for them to say or to come after us about, right? So it's like, for me, it's like, how do we resolve these issues? One, the 5% of the people in the business who are already getting all the traffic, who have hundreds of thousands of followers on the gram, who are easily able to transition their fan base from one platform to another if they get shadow banned. Those are not the people who need to be the thumbnails on the main, on the front page of Pornhub or on the front page of Chatterbait or on the front page. The people who need to be on the front pages of these platforms are the people who actually need the traffic. Right? They're the people who need the money. They're the people who are struggling to pay their bills, right? And so with the technology shift, we're starting to also see that there are a lot of survival workers who are now on OnlyFans. I see people contact me every single day who are doing criminalized and legal forms of sex work, and they're on 6 or 7 platforms, which we all tell people diversify. But the reality is that survival-based Black and brown people and queer and trans people are already on 5 or 6 platforms, and they're still not making the money. Right? So if we do not start to make this shift, it's like, when people leave this industry, they shouldn't be have company, organizations that these Christian evangelical organizations that come in and tell them, okay, I know I gotta rip it, but it's like they come in and they get them to talk about all the bad things that have happened to them to further their narrative. So if we are able to then, make it to where people are able to make more money, are able to protect themselves, then we don't have to worry about the aunties coming in and telling us what we're not doing because we're already resolving it ourselves.
We've already changed the narrative.
Right.
Yeah. Crystals?
Got chicken skin. Thank you for saying that.
Did Cinnamon take a lot of your talking points?
No, yes, and also I think, I'm queer, I'm a person of color, I've been working in the trans industry for 13 years, and it has shifted, but you're absolutely right, it's like, we're so insular in some ways because the industry is so segregated. It has certainly gotten better, but it has felt like, at least in my part of the industry, that we have to fend for ourselves. And it looks like in different ways, you know what I mean? It's in terms of visibility, it's in terms of diversity, in terms of story and body and all that kind of stuff. And I think what you're talking about and sort of like, we need to help the most marginalized people because that's the only real way to uplift the entire community, I think is absolutely correct. It is something that I scream all the time, but being in the little part of the pocket of the industry I think I just make people upset. But it's true, you know what I mean? And I think for me, not being a sex worker, but having close proximity, I want to use my privilege in any way that I can, you know, because I think that's my responsibility of being in the business sector of it. You know, I'm not taking the same risks as sex workers. I have, you know, there are places of oppression and marginality that I have, but like I also have privilege. And so I feel like part of the change that has to happen is internally in the business sector where we are supporting those that we are profiting from. And it has to start with supporting community who are the most marginalized.
Technology?
Technology. Well, and absolutely what you're saying. Well, you know, and how you're talking about sort of like that Black, brown, trans, queer people are already on 6 or 7 platforms and not making enough money. I just did a roundtable for our company where we were talking about survival sex work. And we're talking about paperwork and all this stuff. And one of the performers is like, I can't afford to do all of these things to put things in place legally because it's just too expensive. You know, he said like, you know, we can't even necessarily print out the paperwork that we're supposed to have. You know, and so it's like, how can we have discussions to make access to these things free or accessible to everybody? Because it only makes things unsafe. And it feels like I said, it further perpetuates the separation between the mainstream and I think everybody else, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, just to really quickly, we saw this happen as we always do after the recent production hold was instituted, where immediately people were like, you know, it's like it's the creators, it's the creators, it's the creators. And so, but it's like if we are not providing the creators with the tools that they need to be able to stay safe according to industry standard, then we're doing our entire industry a disservice. And again, like in talking about technology, Twitter Spaces became a huge tool during the production hold to not only reach mainstream performers, but independent creators who had no idea what kind of testing protocols the mainstream industry has and why. And the mainstream performers who didn't have the sex education that they needed about their own bodies, or even where to get treatment if they did test positive for something. And so like being able to use this kind of technology to disseminate information to a wide net of people in an instant. I mean, we were having rooms with like 300-400 people for 12-hour days. Like we were seeing like 13, 15, 1,800 people over the course of a day who were on all of these platforms. And so like that as, you know, using social audio to instantly disseminate this kind of, you know, important information to
What
not
we should
exist.
be doing.
It didn't exist
Right.
10 years ago.
Right, and it's what we should be doing. So we could be, it seems like we focus a lot on using technology to sort of create and disseminate content. But what we could also be focusing on is using it to create access, education, information, and making it like truly resonant with people. So it's one thing for me to be like, come to my Zoom meeting, which, you know, that's actually sort of new, pre-pandemic, but also using all sorts of different things, like where people are at. Corey, we're gonna push 2 into 1 because we are pushing on time. Tell me a bit about like law and technology, and then talk about law inside our community, because we definitely drifted over to community issues. Lawyer us.
Well, I mean, again, I'm being like,
Gloom and doom, Corey.
how do you follow up these 3? It's impossible.
With gloom and doom.
I can't. No, there's no gloom and doom. But you can't follow up these. You really can't follow up these 3. You just can't. They're so spectacular. I feel like I'm kind of the odd fish up here this time. But I'll tell you something. Law and technology, and you made me think of a couple things. First thing is when COVID hit, and basically all of our worlds changed, right? And everything went to shit. It was actually right before xbiz Miami that I think the first one was going on. You guys remember what happened? Everyone thought it was like the end, and like holy shit, it was like, we were packing our bags, like burying holes in our backyards and stuff. xbiz said, no, fuck that. We're gonna continue on, the show goes on. And what did they do? They moved their show online. They did it via, I can't remember if it was Zoom or whether it was a third-party platform. I can't remember which one it was, but regardless, the show went on. And they said, no. And we continued to get our messages out. We continued to get the information out because xbiz said, no, fuck this. We're not gonna just end the show. We're not gonna stop getting together. We're not gonna stop just because, something happened. And you want technology, well shit. You think xbiz would have been able to do a virtual show like that 10 years ago?
No.
No chance in hell. There's your example of technology. You want to talk about technology and the law interacting? Well, one of my clients in this room, one of my heroes, Ginger Banks, who's one of the most outspoken people on social media. A couple years ago, Ginger made some statements on Twitter because she believed that she was doing the right thing, and she believed that she had something to say, and she believed that there was something that the industry needed to know. And she's a big girl, and she knew that there potentially could have been consequences for what she said, and there were. And when people came knocking on her door who said, fuck you, you shouldn't have said that online, I was there to protect her. But it wasn't about me being there to protect her. What it was about is watching the courageousness of someone like Ginger, who was able to say something that a lot of people, frankly, what she said probably saved the lives and the physical well-being of God knows how many people, but she did it. And I was proud of her, and I was proud to represent her, but if it wasn't for social media, and for people like Ginger, want to see law and interaction, aren't you guys sick of seeing every fucking day in the news now someone else being sued for something that they say online? I mean, it drives me fucking crazy. And what all these government people are trying to do right now, Chantal, you want to talk about law, is you got all these people trying to destroy Section 230. You guys know what Section 230 is? Section 230 is basically free speech on the internet. It's what allows these platforms to survive legally. It's why we have Twitter. It's why we have Instagram. It's why you have xbiz TV. It's why you have all of these various different media sources, because they don't have to ultimately be responsible for something that their user does. The way the government wants to do it, though, they have this pile of shit that they're trying to pass called the Earn It Act, which wants to change the whole industry on its head, and it's going to make platforms like Twitter, and again, xbiz.net, xbiz TV, and all of these various different platforms out there, it's going to make them have to think twice about what they're going to be allowed to do, because the government wants to take their protection away. The government wants to say, well, you guys are going to be liable too for shit that you know absolutely nothing about. This sort of stuff is, again, Section 230 is by far probably the most important law that ever happened in terms of the development, the growth of freedom of expression on the internet. And I'm telling you guys, okay, pay attention to this thing. Because if you guys aren't out there on Twitter and social media and saying to your congressman, hey, are you supporting this kind of crap? And when they say, yeah, I am, we'll say, then wait a second. You remember that time when you pulled in 2.5 million votes because you were able to campaign on Twitter? Well, Twitter's not going to exist, jackass, if Section 230 isn't there.
Corey is currently campaigning.
I'm campaigning.
Because Corey's campaigning, we have 2 minutes left. This is my way to make you
I'm
sit
done.
down for a
She said
second.
I'm done.
Sorry. We touched a bit on community already. I knew this would really be a lot of time. 30 seconds. Community commentary and what you see next. 30 seconds. I'm holding you to it. Crystal, go.
We have to do better. We have to do better. I think that we are doing better, but there's definitely room for growth. I think the next part that we have to work on is our discernment. I think that a lot of us are in this state of, I don't want to say crisis, but kind of crisis, and so it makes the discernment piece tricky, because I think our system is broken, but it's not broken in a way that it can't work. And so for us to continue to be creative in finding solutions and to really work together and to use our privilege wherever it may be to uplift others, I think it's something that can shift in our industry, but needs to be done really all together.
Amazing. Cinnamon, 30 seconds.
This industry has an internalized whorephobia problem.
Yep.
There is no sex worker who is better than any other sex worker, regardless of whether you work in the legal trade or if you work on the street. It doesn't matter whether you are, because the other side, they view us all as whores. They think that we're all immoral, we're all penalized the same way under the law. And at the end of the day, we have to start lifting each other up. I said it earlier, we have to make sure that we are taking care of the most marginalized folks in this industry so that we can actually continue to survive, so that Corey can go and fight the folks that want to shut us down. And we have to start, when there is crisis, we cannot continue to blame the in-person workers, the hot wives, the independent creators that are fucking the mainstream creators based on the information that they may not know or the access that they do not have.
Amazing. Siri, 30 seconds.
So this is a business event, like a business conference, but I have this thing in my head every year at like an xbiz conference where I'm like, I feel like I'm just here because I want to see friends. Like, I don't feel like I'm in like a business mindset, really. And I guess where that's coming from is that like, one of the things I think about a lot as a content creator is like, I love that we are like a productive, fantastic industry full of like hustlers, and I love the mentality that I see a lot of fellow creators with, which is like, get your bag, but also we don't have enough like collectivism. We're not doing enough for our community. Like, there are too many people who are only after getting their bag. You should get your bag, but like, look at the people around you and see what they need help with.
Get your bag and, Corey, 30 seconds.
I'm gonna make this easy because Siri just set me up. There are numerous nonprofit organizations in this industry. I'm on the board of Pineapple Support. I was one of the first board members on Pineapple Support. I'm on the advisory board of the ASACP. xbiz's founder, Al Kelby, who's hiding in the back of the room right now, is one of the board members of the Free Speech Coalition. The question is, are you guys participating with these organizations? And I'm not just talking about putting money in. It's not just all about money. The FSC just had an election. I think I saw one name that I didn't recognize running for the board. Guys, get involved. Get involved, get involved, get involved. These organizations are there. Help them out. Get involved.
Wow. I actually set the timer. That's so good. We are out of time. Corey, Crystal, Cinnamon, Siri, thank you so much for being here and giving your time so generously. Mindbrowse shows are brought to you live, streaming and archived free of charge by Angie Roundtree at shush.com, the web's premier site for pleasure-centric, sex-positive adult cinema. Visit Shush on Twitter at Shush for Women. As always, I am Dr. Chantal Tibbles, sociologist in the industry, friend of us all. I love you all. We'll see you next time.